Sudeki revolves around two warring factions who are vying for the complete control of the kingdom. As the player, you set out to bring an end to the conflict and take on the role of several characters that not only present their own unique gameplay styles, but highly eccentric personalities as well. This aspect lends a playful nature to the overall feel and presentation of the world, and because of it, the narrative easily becomes one of the better facets of the experience. On the gameplay front, the battle system takes on a real-time formula that revolves around the use of intricate melee combos that can be learned or developed over the course of the adventure. Add to this a whole range of magical abilities that can also be earned throughout the journey, and what you have is a truly engaging and rewarding combat system that serves the on-screen action incredibly well. Although not perfect, Sudeki is still a game that deserves a spot in your collection as well. Starting out life on the PC, the Deus Ex series has always been something that I've had a solid interest in. It's essentially a first-person shooter with an immense focus upon several RPG elements that make up the gameplay as a whole. As the player, you take on the role of Alex, whose general appearance and gender can be customized at the beginning of the adventure before setting out into the near-future version of Seattle. Now, the biggest part of Deus Ex Invisible War is the incredible amount of choice that permeates throughout nearly every facet of the experience. From the way that you can approach every situation, may that be guns blazing or stealth, to the dialogue options that alter the flow of the narrative, there is an immense amount of freedom. With a wide range of weaponry such as sniper rifles and machine guns, to more tactical abilities such as hacking computer systems and absorbing life energy from fallen foes, the amount of options on offer really help open up the gameplay opportunities, which does nothing but help the experience shine. Deus Ex Invisible War offers up one of the best RPGs on the system that truly deserves a playthrough. Developed by From Software and released in 2003, Otogi is an action RPG that puts you into the role of a man known as Raiko. After being awakened by a mysterious female, you set out on a quest to rescue several spirits and restore the world's flow of ki, a special energy that keeps the peace within Otogi. Gameplay sees the adventure being broken up into several missions that are all made up of diverse objectives, which really help the experience from becoming stale. During play, your life gauge plays a huge role and consists of orbs that measure hit points and a purple magic gauge. This gauge, as long as some power is left, allows you to perform dashes and activate abilities that can devastate the enemy in a blink of an eye. On the other hand, once it's depleted, not only do you find yourself unable to dash or use magic, but your life gauge will slowly decrease until you refill your magic by collecting power-ups from fallen foes. It all comes together to create a gameplay loop that will constantly keep you on your toes, making sure that the action is always turned up to 11 and does nothing but help the experience excel. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance shares much in common with the likes of Diablo. It all takes place from an isometric point of view and centers around your character seeking revenge for being assaulted by a thieves guild. Now, to be fair, the story isn't that much to write home about, but once it gets going, it opens up to a much grander narrative that involves the fate of the entire world. It's during gameplay where Baldur's Gate truly comes into its own and provides an enjoyable but at times frantic experience. There are several classes to choose from, which all offer their own distinct advantages during combat. There's Fighter, Ranger, or the Sorcerer that each possess a unique list of abilities that make encountering enemies all the more manageable, but thanks to the robust leveling up system that's in place as well, you'll constantly be learning new ways to tackle each and every situation that occurs. One final aspect of the game that has to be commended are the visuals. Each enemy, location, and spell that is cast brings the world to life in a truly mesmerizing fashion and helps the adventure elevate itself amongst its contemporaries. Jade Empire revolves around an orphan from an extinct race of people known as the Spirit Monks. These monks possessed incredible powers and were once called upon by the Emperor of the Jade Empire in times of need. The journey begins in a remote area of the world known as Two Rivers, where you train under a master named Lee, with a new enemy slowly appearing in the form of undead warriors that threaten the entire kingdom. You are compelled to set out and ultimately bring it to an end. Now, gameplay wise, Jade Empire truly excels, with combat being the real highlight of the game. It's all presented as a real-time system that takes advantage of up to 5 separate styles. You have support, magic, basic, weapon and transformation. Each offer unique ways to approach battles, with the most prevalent being that of magic and transformation. As you would expect, several elements such as fire, ice and earth make up your magic abilities, with transformation allowing you to turn into the enemy and take advantage of any specific abilities they possess. It manages to keep each encounter feeling fresh and goes a long way to help the player feel engaged throughout the nearly 40-hour adventure. If you never got around to it, Jade Empire quite simply is one of the finest RPGs on the system, and it totally deserves your time. Evolving the many systems and ideas that were introduced in the previous iteration, KOTOR 2 once again invites the player to undertake an adventure that spans the entire galaxy. The narrative takes on a much more darker tone than what was introduced before, with a sense of dread filtering through the entire adventure, but what remains intact is the incredibly addictive gameplay. May that be the combat system, leveling up and carving out your own unique path, or the general amount of exploring and interacting with the huge range of diverse NPCs and characters, but it also manages to introduce new aspects into the mix, which further several mechanics that players will already be accustomed to, such as a new selection of force abilities, a whole host of new customization options and weapons that makes KOTOR 2 one of the most essential RPGs on the system. One of the greatest aspects of Elder Scrolls Morrowind is the completely open-ended nature of the adventure. There is no predetermined path for you to follow, which opens it up to a wide range of side activities and tasks to undertake apart from the main narrative. As with most RPGs, Morrowind sees you creating a character and allows you to select from a range of skills in which to cater them to your specific style of play. From stealth to a higher emphasis upon strength, there are a generous amount of options that will complement your approach to the gameplay. Matching the staggering diversity of the world that's presented has to be the amount of abilities and weapons that can be earned or located throughout the game. Finding a balance between magic and physical based attacks is key to overcoming the various situations you'll find yourself in, and with the in-depth leveling up system that allows you to evolve your abilities over time, you'll always be finding new ways to interact with the world. If you're an RPG fan, this is one of the best in its genre on the system, and well and truly deserves a playthrough. At first, Fable seems like a simple RPG. It revolves around a young boy who loses his parents in an attack on his village and soon sets out to seek revenge. But the story gives way to a much larger narrative that involves the fate of the entire kingdom. It can be quite slow in revealing its deeper mysteries, but the payoff is well worth the effort. Now, the adventure is broken up into a variety of mission types, such as storyline, protecting, stealing, and many others that lend the experience a range of activities in which to undertake. Each battle plays out in real time and sees a huge range of weapons and abilities at your fingertips. From bows and arrows to swords and magic, there are plenty of ways to tackle each encounter. One of the biggest aspects of Fable though has to be how your actions contribute to how your abilities develop. You can essentially become good or evil. Carrying out deviant actions will net you experience points and contribute to your growth, but your standing in the world will diminish overall, which ultimately makes it harder to procure items from shopkeepers and members of each location, for example. It's a neat little system that affords the player an extreme amount of freedom when it comes to their presence within the world. If you've never got around to it, Fable is definitely one to play, and with it now being available on modern consoles as well, there's never been a better time. Shenmue 2 picks up right after the events of the first entry and once again sees players assuming the role of Ryo Hazuki. Leaving Japan behind and travelling to Hong Kong, the experience opens up in a huge way when compared to the previous game. The locations you'll be visiting are far more varied both in size and detail, as well as the narrative that really starts to develop and introduce new elements for players to digest. Gameplay wise, much remains the same. A huge focus upon exploration and martial arts is still at the forefront, with a few new features that make the overall adventure a lot more user-friendly, such as a handy map feature and the introduction of pawn shops that can really help out when money is running tight. But just exploring the vast areas that are presented is the real star of the show. From the bustling docks of Wan Chai to the more rural offerings of the Chinese countryside, there is a lot to see and do over the course of the adventure, with plenty of optional content to get stuck into as well. If you haven't played Shenmue before, I highly recommend playing the first game prior to jumping into this one, as it does does require an understanding of the events that have taken place to be fully appreciated. KOTOR is an RPG that allows the player to create a character and begin their own journey towards becoming a Jedi or Sith. Throughout the journey, you'll encounter an immense amount of worlds, NPCs and characters that really flesh out the believability of the adventure, with the finest aspect being that of the narrative. First off, it is entirely up to the player to decide which way they want to develop their character. Through many meaningful decisions, it is possible to build a character that leans either to the light or dark side of the Force, which affects nearly every aspect of the gameplay. Differing skills and abilities as well as story beats really help promote the replayability of the experience, as one playthrough will never be the same as the last. The battling system is turn-based in nature and at first might seem quite off-putting to some, but once you've spent some time with it and got used to the several mechanics in place, as well as the insane amount of variety, it all becomes second nature. KOTOR is now available on a variety of platforms, so if you don't have an Xbox, it is now easier than ever to play it yourself.